Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. I'm absolutely thrilled to have back Andre Paris. Andre and I have, I'm not even sure how long we've known each other, 7 or 8, maybe 10 years. He's been on the pod several times, and I ran into him again at Compliance Week 2025, which was held at the end of April in DC. And I said, "Can I get you on the pod?" And he said, "Yes." So, Andre, with that incredibly long-winded introduction, welcome back.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. I believe it's the third time that I'm here recording with you, and it's always a pleasure.
So, let's start with just having you remind our audience of your role in compliance and ethics, and maybe bring us up to date with what you've been up to since the pandemic.
Perfect. So I have a GRC consultancy, governance, risk management, compliance consultancy that also deals with data protection issues for our clients. And maybe the role that I like the most to develop is my role as a teacher, as a professor, as a researcher. I'm currently a PhD candidate in one of the universities here in Brazil, where I also teach. And being a teacher and also a researcher, it's amazing because I think we are always able to share knowledge with our students, learn with them, and in the researching part of it, to develop the field. And that's something that really make me get out of bed very easy every day.
So, I'd like to mention your book, Ethics and Transparency: A Path to Compliance. Can you tell us a little bit about the book, when it came out, and how you may be thinking about following it up, or having being the son of a university professor, I understand PhD candidates and how much work that may take. So you may be focused on that for a short period of time.
Yeah, that's true. So I believe the first edition came out in 2019. We are already in the second one that came out in 2022. And I'm already planning to come up with a third edition with more content, additional chapters, and also the revision of some of the content of the previous chapters to expand their content. But as you said, we have a lot of publications to do regarding the PhD course. So a lot of scientific articles that we must publish as prerequisites to develop our PhD program. And I'm also planning when I finally am able to write my thesis to publish it. And I will focus on how AI systems can be used to expand state surveillance, the risks that this expansion can bring to civil liberties and for individuals, and how can we try to manage it.
Well, and that really leads to the topic I really wanted to explore with you on this podcast, because since you and I last had the chance to visit, we've had an explosion with artificial intelligence. And at least in the United States, it started in November of 2023 when ChatGPT went public. And since that time, we've had multiple other companies using AI and bringing tools available to the workplace. I use them in a variety of business contexts. So, I guess maybe could I start by asking you, what are some of the ethical challenges you see raised by the advancement of AI? And I'll let you pick the field or silo.
Perfect. So I believe that one significant concern is algorithmic bias. AI systems learn from data, and if that data reflects societal biases, the AI can end up discriminating or making unfair decisions. We've seen examples like this regarding facial recognition, AI that perform poorly on certain these are AI systems that perform poorly in some ethnic groups, or for example, also in AI systems regarding hiring, algorithms that unintentionally filtered out qualified women or minority candidates because that their training data was biased. Another challenge is, of course, transparency and explainability. AI systems, particularly the ones that are driven by deep neural network, may operate as the specialists called black boxes, making it difficult for users or even developers to understand how the decisions are made. And that poses some issues because if an AI system denies someone a loan or determines a prison sentence length, we need to know the rationale behind it. Otherwise, how do we appeal or correct a potentially wrong decision? AI should ideally be able to explain its decisions in a human understandable term. And I could also mention privacy and surveillance issues. As AI becomes increasingly capable of collecting and analyzing vast amounts of personal data, there is a heightened risk of privacy violations and misuse of sensitive information. Think, for example, of AI-driven surveillance. Cameras with facial recognition, tracking people in real time, algorithms scraping our online data. If those information are misused, this can intrude on privacy and even chill our civil liberties. And as I mentioned, part of my PhD research looks at AI used for surveillance and how to limit its use by authorities to protect individual rights. We see governments and companies deploying AI in ways that could monitor people extensively. And while without ethical guidelines, I believe that's a serious threat to freedom and privacy. To sum up, I would also like to address the risk regarding autonomous systems making harmful decisions. For example, self-driving cars. They need ethical frameworks to decide how to act in life and death decisions. And also in extreme end, we need to worry about AI in warfare. And also, if the AI can become too powerful without proper controls. That's the classic Skynet scenario. But even on a small scale, an AI making stock trades or managing critical infrastructure could cause harm, and if the AI behaves somehow unexpectedly. So I believe that to address these ethical challenges, we need a proactive governance and continuous dialogue, not only among lawyers, but also technologists, ethicists, regulators, and the broader community to ensure that the AI systems remain ethical and trustworthy to us.
Let me maybe transition or merge the questions of any research or experience you have done or are doing in the academic arena with how that research might be applied for businesses going forward. So for instance, are you doing any of that type of research or even studying it for, once again, in your academic component? But then how can the experiments or your research really help guide maybe someone like me who might be advising a chief compliance officer or even a company?
Perfect. So I believe that my research will be able to point out which elements are essential to develop and to maintain an AI system as trustworthy and ethical. So we need to have some principles like explainability. So since the development of an AI system, it should be able to maintain its capability to explain how the decisions are made by the AI in a human understandable way. I think that's a key one. And also we should since the development of this kind of technology drive tests regarding the propensity to bias. So for example, facial recognition systems. We already know that they are not 100% capable of identifying individuals with previous images, but they are less they are less precise depending on which kind of data, which kind of image are in their database. So for example, usually technologies that were made in Asia are more precise to recognize individuals that have a Asian descendant. And on the other hand, the ones that are made in the Western are more able to identify Caucasian men and have problems to identify Black persons and even more with Black women. So to exemplify, we need to always test for bias in our AI systems. We need to have the capability to explain how the decisions are made, and we still need to deal with AI systems like a tool. So it needs human oversight. So we can not blindly trust the decisions that are made. And that's why it's so important to have the principle of explainability in place.
So I'm glad you brought those up because there's a growing dialogue in the United States, at least, around the use of AI in the, I'll call it talent acquisition, job hunting, looking for work, that entire process. And some people are becoming increasingly frustrated because they may send out 50 or even 100 resumes and don't even get a single callback or request for further information. And these are people with undergraduate degrees and sometimes multiple postgraduate degrees. And so there has to be something going on. But unfortunately, we don't know what. And I don't think it would surprise anyone to hear that there's bias in America around racial stereotypes or gender stereotypes, and that those are seemingly creeping into the AI because it's based on Americans. And in Brazil, it's probably based on Brazilians. And so I think our countries would have similar backgrounds along those lines. How can we begin to end this or at least identify it so it can be corrected or remediated?
Perfect. So we have also an US example. Amazon used to have internal AI systems to promote its employees, so to evaluate the candidates for a new spot in the organization, and it identified that it was giving privilege to men in the terms of women. So it was discontinued, and one of the ways to do it is investigating. You need to test before even implementing this kind of technology. But as you mentioned, since 2023, we are experiencing a race towards AI systems. So there is a lot of pressure to develop and to employ this kind of technologies. And I believe that this rush, it's not useful for the ethical development of this kind of technology. So I'm not sure if every one of these AI systems are being tested before being deployed, and I don't believe that they are also being monitored. Here in Brazil, we have in our general data protection law, the data subjects have the opportunity to first ask if some decision was made exclusively by an automated decision that is without human intervention. And if so, we also have the right to object to that decision and ask for a human review. So this gives a ways to mitigate this kind of issue, because the candidates that might feel harm could, here in Brazil, ask for a human revision of this kind of decision. But it's also, I don't know how much effective this kind of provision is in practice, because I don't believe that the developers of this kind of technology can explain how the decisions were actually made, if you know what I mean. So they can attend to the request made by this candidate, but I'm not sure if they will be able to explain how the AI system the AI system that they employed got to the decision that are being questioned.
Let me turn to an area that I know you are passionate about, and that's data protection. And why do you see data protection as a civil liberty that literally all people, no matter where they live in whatever country, should be able to have as a basic civil liberty?
Sure. So I believe that historically, regimes that have suppressed dissent have often relied on mass surveillance and data collection to intimidate, control, or even eliminate opposition. And modern data-driven governance makes this kind of control even more efficient and pervasive. Facial recognition technology at protests, AI-driven risk scores, and mass phone tracking are just a few examples of how data collection can be used to monitor and punish behaviors. Think about it. If our personal data, information about our beliefs, our health, our communications can be collected and misused freely, it threatens our freedom. Privacy is able to give people autonomy. It is the right to be let alone, to control information about yourself. Without that, other freedoms start to erode. One of the key civil rights at stake is the right to freedom of expression. When individuals know that their online activities, communications, or public demonstrations are being monitored or stored indefinitely, they may begin to self-censor out of fear of reprisal. Because maybe this government is a democratic one, but how will I know it about the future? Maybe it will come an authoritarian regime which I can be dissent, or which is contrary to my religious belief, to my philosophical beliefs, or to the color of my skin, or to to my sexual orientation. So this starts to create what is called a chilling effect, and it poses a threat to democratic participation itself, because people become less willing to speak out, to join protests, or to engage in political activism. UN and human rights reports have provided compelling evidence that since around 2017, more than a million Uyghurs, a minority in China, and other predominant minorities have been detained in camps in Xinjiang without the due process. And these detainees faced forced indoctrination, torture, forced labor, sterilization, and systematic cultural erasure. The surveillance apparatus, including biometric data collection and AI-based monitoring systems, has enabled unprecedented levels of control over an entire ethnic group. And I believe this is just a case to illustrate how data collection without meaningful legal oversight can facilitate mass repression, arbitrary detention, and cultural suppression. The prosecution of minority groups and activists often relies on data harvested from social media platforms, message apps, and other digital tools. Without legal protection, that we are able to limit data sharing and ensure transparency. These digital footprints can be used out of context or used to manipulate or to justify surveillance and criminal charge. So data protection is about more than just securing information. It's about securing our freedom. And in a world where power is increasingly exercised through the control of data, strong privacy protections are essential to ensure that individuals can live, speak, and organize themselves without fear.
Let me turn to something that hopefully every listener on this podcast loves, and that's sports. And in America, we are very passionate about what we call football. In Brazil, you're very passionate about what you call football. But I'm interested in your thoughts on some of the ethical challenges in the sports industry. We've seen those at the highest level with FIFA, with the Olympics, but it really permeates all the way down. And those discussions are ongoing, I think, certainly in America every day, and I would guess probably in Brazil as well. What do you see as some of the top ethical challenges in the sports we both love so much?
Yeah, so one of the most notorious is corruption with governing bodies and event management, as you already mentioned, and match fixing, bribery in awarding of hosting rights. The lack of transparency in financial operations have also plagued international sports organizations. The already mentioned scandals regarding FIFA and the International Olympic Committee have revealed how deeply and systemic these problems can be. And I believe we should also ask ourselves, it is ethical to choose a hosting country in which some of the athletes could go to jail for their sexual orientation. Sports washing has become a common strategy for countries that want to look better worldwide and hide their unethical practice, as we have recently seen. And another issue, of course, is doping and cheating. Despite decades of efforts, and I believe the US is one of the countries that are vanguard in doping prevention, but we still see performance enhancing drugs that are still a big ethical problem. Athletes and sometimes even coaches or national programs have engaged in doping to win competitions. And beyond cheating and corruption, we are also seeing more and more harassment and abuse issues. In recent years, many sports have grappled with cases of coaches or officials abusing athletes with the sexual abuse, emotional abuse, or other misconduct. And of course, that's a big issue, I believe, here in Latin America and also in Europe. I don't see many cases in the US, but racism. Athletes have faced harassment both from within sports and from the public. And I believe the response from clubs, leagues, and sponsors on this matter has been inadequate.
So there was perhaps my favorite English football coach was not English, but a gentleman named Jose Marino, and he called himself the special one. I just called him the sainted one. But he had a phrase that has always stuck with me, and it was, "If something changes the truth of the game, it's wrong." And that can be corruption, it can be match fixing, it can be abuse of players, it can be all of those things. And so
Sure.
I've always loved that phrase, did it change the truth of the game? Because he focused on what happened on the field. That was the truth. And that was the truth he wanted to maintain. Is that a concept that you think we can use as really our basis? That if it changes the truth of the game, we need to look at it and perhaps stop it?
Yeah, sure. And if you think about it, it's also in the best interests of the leagues and the sports clubs to abide to that sentence. Because if fans starts to, for example, believe that matches are fixed, why would I bother go to the stadium? Why would I bother cheer for a sport that I know that's already been fixed? And in long term, this will bankrupt all these sports clubs because there will be no interest more from the fans. So if we change how the nature of and the competitiveness of the sport, we are in long term uh, making making the sports not more profitable. So I believe this makes total sense, and it regards the respect between opponents, and in that we can include the prevention of racism and other kind of discriminations. It includes match fixing and it includes doping, because if you are cheating to have a better performance, you are in some way trying to fix the match through your enhanced performance. So I believe this makes total sense.
Andre, we began this podcast by saying a few words about your book, Ethics and Transparency, A Path to Compliance. I'd like to maybe end with asking you a few more words about that book. Really, I think anyone who's listened to this podcast will now know about your passion for this area and probably understand why you wrote the first volume of the book, or the first edition, I should say. but what has inspired you to keep going? And what's the core message you hope readers will take away from the original book and its updated editions?
Perfect. So when I first wrote it, I wrote because I didn't see at the time a lot of practical resources available. And that's why one part of the book is completely devoted to real case scenario studies and how the theoretical part can be applied in practice. And if I could leave a takeaway or a perception that I would like my readers to have, is that ethics and compliance is a responsibility from all these areas or sectors of the organization. So it becomes with the leadership giving the example, and it trickles down, and everyone should be concerned with it and contribute to the creation of an ethical corporate culture. Because I believe that when an ethics and compliance program is able to return the investment made, that we know that sometimes not cheap, is when an organization is able to foster an ethical corporate culture. So that small steps and consistent steps that create and fosters ethical behaviors, so that people don't even need to look anymore to policies and procedures to know what the right thing to do is, because the culture of the organization is so deepened in their way of operate that it becomes the rule. It embed the ethics in the day-to-day operations.
Well, Andre, I can't think of a better way to end this podcast than your final statement, because unfortunately we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you, if our listeners wanted to connect with you, find out more about your consultancy, and certainly take a look at your book, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
Perfect. So they can reach me out on LinkedIn. Just look for andre.age.paris and you'll find me there. And you can also search for Andre Age Paris on Instagram. I'm also sharing content there. And for the ones that might be interested in my books, they are sold on Amazon stores worldwide. And actually, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can actually read the books for free. So,
well, Andre, thank you again for taking the time to visit me. I promise it will not be as long to the next time you're back on our podcast. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Perfect. Nice to hear that. And thank you again for having me, Tom.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.